information, especially in the digital landscape. How this will go is something that we may all need to follow. We, communication and media scholars and professionals, have long been in the front lines of addressing the concerns of disinformation. What with all the efforts in media literacy that we collectively have implemented over the years? We, and I speak of all of us present and those who are not, are in agreement that media literacy is an essential in the modern world, as essential as basic literacy and numeracy. It used to be that the set of technical skills of reading, writing, and calculating, the so-called 3 Rs, were the sole requisites for a person to be regarded as literate. But this simplistic notion is now rejected outright. The current position these days is that there are multiple literacies needed by individuals to effectively and efficiently operate in a modern society. UNESCO says the term literacy has begun to be used in a much broader metaphorical sense to refer to other skills and competencies. For example, information literacy, visual literacy, media literacy, even scientific literacy. Being media literate thus requires critical thinking skills that empower us as we make decisions, whether in the classroom, in the living room, in the kitchen, in the workplace, in the boardroom, and especially in the voting booth. As advocated by several academic and socio-civic organizations in the Philippines, media literacy is a long-term solution to the many problems and issues that afflict Philippine media. As far as the Philippines Communication Society is concerned, our efforts at elevating media literacy and news journalism skills have been focused on developing individuals who are media and information literate, which means that they are responsible and critical creators and producers, distributors or disseminators, and importantly, users and consumers of information and messages. For one, our National Forum on Communication and Democracy, Philippine Elections 2022, was a series of webinars, the titles of which indicate their focus. In order, these were the Battle of the Trolls, Bata-Bata, Mulat Ka Na Ba, the Youth Vote in 2022, Kanya-Kanyang Diskarte, Campaign Dynamics during the Pandemic, Truth Well Told, Political PR and Advertising, Sakto or Chamba, Political Surveys, are they informing or are they priming? Over-entertained and under-informed, are we politically literate? Data and sentiment analysis, going beyond the surveys. Election, taming the tech titans. Boto mo, bantayan mo. The citizens vote watch. And anyari, post-election analysis. Each of the webinars in the series were well watched. And because they can still be accessed in the PCS and TVUP websites, they exist as rich, open educational resources, free to use in the training and continuing education of journalists, content creators, students, and faculty of communication and media, and by the general public. By the way, this webinar series, as well as the media literacy modules that PCS embarked on, were planned following a framework that encourages complex reading, listening, analytical, and decision-making skills. May I also mention that on March 29, which is just a couple of weeks from now, PCS will launch its webinar series on artificial intelligence, titled Ay Naku, Understanding the Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Media and Communication Education. The first of these 3 webinar series is subtitled The AI Revolution in Media and Communication, and will focus on the specific areas of content creation, news production, and social media, where Robbie Alampay will be moderator. The second episode in the series will be in April on the topic Unlocking the Potential of AI, Strategies for Success in the Digital Age. And the third is titled Preparing for the Future, Integrating AI into Media and Education. Culminating the webinar series will be a hybrid international conference in June titled Exploring the Possibilities, the Future of AI in Communication and Education. Naturally, invited speakers and resource persons will be the experts in the field. I sincerely hope that this advanced information whets your interest and appetite for the series. Now, back to the Latin dictum that I started with. In necessaris unitas, in dubius libertas, in omnibus caritas. Translated, in essentials, unity. In doubtful or controversial matters, freedom. But in all things, charity, understanding, or compassion. This wise old Latin dictum attributed to Peter Maederlin, a German Lutheran theologian, is attributed to Peter Maederlin, a German Lutheran theologian. Thank you. In 1626. But more originally, it is Marco Antonio de Dominis, 1624, the Catholic Archbishop of Spalato, who was Jesuit educated. It is a dictum that we may use not just to guide politics and communication, but almost all aspects of our lives. In necessaris unitas, whatever is important should bind us together. Together, we bring education to all. Together, we are involved in our civic duties because we are all Filipinos and all citizens of a democracy. In dubius libertas, in controversial matters, and politics is the realm of controversy, let there be liberty and freedom in the discussion, in the unraveling of positions, and in the freedom of expression. In omnibus caritas, but always and in all matters, regardless of agreement or argument, let charity, let love reign. Let us be respectful, inclusive, and open to diversity. Let compassion and kindness be hallmarks, not hate nor violence. And as we said it in the 70s, make love, not war. It is a message that is apropos at all times. Thank you very much for your attention, and may this afternoon's activity be educational and intellectually profitable for all of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pernia. That was a very rich and insightful opening remarks. And before we continue with our program, I'd like to recognize or acknowledge the presence of the PSSC Executive Director, Dr. Lourdes M. Portus, with us here today. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us, and the rest of the staff of the PSSC who are with us today. The PCS Review 2022 issue editor is an associate professor at the Department of Communication Research of the University of the Philippines Diliman College of Mass Communication. While she conducts both quantitative and qualitative research studies, she primarily teaches quantitative research methods, measurement and sampling, and quantitative data analysis at both undergraduate and graduate levels. She also actively engages in academic research on communication and new media, online discourse, media effects, mass media, ICT and development, political communication, and transnational migration and family communication. She is here today to provide an introduction to the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Maria Rosel S. San Pascual. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Jazz. Good afternoon, everyone. My message is a message of gratitude, felicitation, and invitation. On gratitude, thank you, Philippines Communication Society, led by Dr. Elena Pernia, for giving political communication a space in PCS Review. PCS Review is truly a welcoming platform for young and emerging scholars to share their evidence-based work to the wider public. Thank you to the team behind PCS Review, led by Dr. Jonalu Labor, who helped us every step of the way, from releasing the call for papers, consolidating all submissions, coordinating with the authors, contributors, and reviewers, copy editing all manuscripts, managing editorial and production timelines, up to events planning, one-man team tech support. Maraming salamat, PCS Review team. Thank you to all our reviewers who share their expertise in assessing the articles and in giving their valuable feedback. Thank you to all the authors and contributors who have bravely submitted their manuscripts for consideration and possible publication. It takes a village to get an issue published. So my sincerest gratitude to the entire community for generously taking part in enacting our shared responsibility of pitching in to advance the perpetual growth of our discipline. On felicitations, congratulations to all the authors. Gerard Martin C. Suarez of Oxford's Candidate, Thea Pamela Pauline A. Javier of From the Words of a Strong Man, Venice Micah D. Nieva, Ayra Dorine F. Gallema, and Orville B. Tatcho of Framing Sara Duterte Carpio's candidacy in the 2022 elections, and Lordivine Marie T. Pineda of Capua, a phenomenological inquiry on the lived mediated communication practices of anak bayan activists in the Philippines during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, authors, for taking the comments constructively, for revising your articles accordingly, and for defying the odds of feeling demotivated in submitting a revised version or several revised versions of your manuscript sa kabila ng napakaraming iba pang mga importanteng ganaps sa buhay-buhay. Congratulations as well to our essay contributors, Orville B. Tatcho and Clifford C. Chan, of a preliminary inquiry on the merits and legal basis of presidential debates in the Philippines, and Holden Kenneth G. Alcazaren of Classrooms as Social-Politically Conscious Learning Spaces. Congratulations too to our feature contributors, John Benedik A. Bunquin and Marie Fatima I. Gao of Digital Public Pulse, Mapping the Digital Landscape of Philippine Politics, and Christine Joy A. Magpayo of Research in Political Communication as a Response to Social Issues, an interview with Dr. Clarissa David. Getting published is always a nakakakilig experience, and I'm sharing the kilig moment with you. Savor it, authors and contributors, you deserve it. Isang may social distancing pero may higpit pa rin na group hug para sa lahat. And last but not the least, on invitation, I would like to invite communication and media scholars and professionals to access the 2022 issue of PCS Review on Philippine Politics and Communication. I also hope that our issue's modest contribution to the local political communication literature could enthuse more communication and media scholars, professionals, and the public to engage in local studies, essays, and discourses that probe and theorize on the intersection of politics and communication. Marami pa kasing mga tanong na kailangang sagutin at mga issues na kailangan pang siyasatin ng pananaliksik. In a world mired with information malay, our rigorously and ethically conducted studies and evidence-based contributions as social science researchers are ever more urgent and critical, because it takes a community to face off the relentless intrusion of misinformation and disinformation. Mabuhay ang pananaliksik at ang mga mananaliksik ng bayan. Mabuhay ang Philippines Communication Society. Maraming salamat, PCS Review.
Thank you very much, Dr. San Pascual, and also congratulations on your promotion as full professor in the University of the Philippines. And now we start with the rest of the program. For the first half of the program, we are giving the floor to our research authors here and online as they present their research works. You may take note of questions that you may want to ask later on during the open forum. So let me now introduce our research authors. First, we have Gerard Martin C. Suarez, a PhD Media Studies student at the College of Mass Communication of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. His present work focuses on the intersections between elites, disinformation, democracy, and citizen practices, and he also focuses on local governance within the Philippines. The second research is authored by Thea, Pamela, Pauline A. Javier, a communication teacher, researcher, and author. She teaches at the De La Salle College of St. Benilde Antipolo campus and studies PhD communication at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is currently writing her dissertation on digital mothering while exclusively breastfeeding her 14-month-old son. Third research is authored by a group of researchers from UP Baguio. We have Venice, Micah, Nieva, a BA communication student at the University of the Philippines, Baguio. Since 2020, she has worked with various digital communication teams such as Rappler, Amnesty PH, UP Baguio, and Unpollute. Ayra Dorine Famador Gallema is a BA communication student at the UP Baguio, and since 2010, she has served select communities as a member of her student and church councils. Her interests include performing arts, audiovisual production, social-civic involvement, and political leadership. And lastly, Orville Tatcho from this group is an assistant professor and the chair of the Department of Communication in UP Baguio. In 2021, he earned his PhD in communication from the University of Alabama as a Fulbright Shed Scholar in the USA. His research interests include presidential debates, political messaging in electoral campaigns, and rhetoric. Lastly, we have Ms. Lordivine Marie T. Pineda, a fourth-year BA Communication Research student at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Raised by war survivors, she joins organizations that pioneer discourse and democracy, like the University of the Philippines Debate Society. Her research interests involve political philosophy in the digitized world. Let's give our floor to the authors.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Marami pong salamat for having me here. Ako po si Gerard Suarez, PhD in Media Studies. Papabilisin ko na lang po yung aking presentation, pero feel free to ask me as much as you want afterwards. So, my research work is entitled Hoxford's Candidate, Political Memes and Empowering Response to Dying Democracy. So, bakit ba ako tumingin ng memes? So, contextualize ko lang very briefly. Popular kasi sa discourse ngayon is that disinformation has killed democracy, popularized by Maria Ressa, na as if wala tayong palag against tech companies and echo chambers fighting back and stifling Philippine democracy discourse dito sa Pilipinas. So looking at the image, para siyang this nebulous thing, para siyang monster na kakainin tayo whole. Ang ginawa ko lang naman sa paper ko, tinanong ko, how accurate is this of a picture of Philippine politics? And since citizen angle yung aking interest, parang, is there anything that citizens can do in order to respond and enact democratic practices within this context? So next. So ito yung aking methodology before I do the thing. Ang ginawa ko po ay gumawa ko ng opportunistic corpus of over 104,000 comments compiled from 6 Facebook sources accessed on March 2022, focusing on the article na Oxford graduate si Dear President. Na obviously hindi totoo. Tinignan ko yung discourse of that saka yung the way people responded. Gumawa ko ng discourse analysis of the above while situating it within the historical context. Saan ba siya nanggaling? Gano'n na ba katagal itong lie na Oxford candidate siya? And socioculturally within the Philippine context as it responded to the Philippine elections. Gumawa ko ng themes, tapos nag-reflect ako sa aking initial research inquiry. So next please. Ayan. Ito yung aking mga conceptual frameworks in approaching this. From Deuce na I got the idea that we live in media, not with it. So the difference is, parang if the initial framing has media as separate from us, parang malayo siya, forces are acting upon us. By living in media, I want to acknowledge that mediated practices are practices, that they are things that we do regularly. And by doing them regularly, it means that we can have an impact back. Hindi lang siya basta-basta. I also looked at it from a popular culture framework, na something that seems trivial or normally regarded as wala lang, pang chismis lang, pang showbiz lang, is discourse and hence a possible site of struggle. And lastly, I also looked at it from the participatory democratic practices are transformative, hence it is a form of resistance. Na yun nga, as long as we are still participating democratically, we are still thinking politically, meron pa ding form of resistance, however slight. So next. So, okay. This is a series of parang examples lang that I got from my work. So ito yung first theme, basically, there were a bunch of people saying, wala silang pakialam na hindi siya Oxford candidate. So, basahin ko. You can say anything you want. We love BBM. He is an honest and sincere man, my next president. Or, wag niyo siyang ibating na anak. Ay, wag mong ilalagay yung kasalanan ng tatay sa anak. And similar themes na wala silang pakialam. Next. Okay. Another theme that I found was people were also deflecting the blame. Nasabi lang, kahit wala naman siyang candidate, the other candidates are much worse. So for example, si Lenny, people were using memes to say na, hindi naman siya marunong mag-math kahit abogado siya. 40 times 4, 160, ano daw? Next. Tapos meron ding mga ganyan images of parang glorifying BBM. Okay. The theme is BBM. Basta ano man mangyari, BBM. Tapos if you click next, ay hala natakman. Pero there were a lot of messages and comments stating just repeatedly BBM. Tapos puro emoji. So on the first hand, we can see that there is some truth to the narrative that this information has been drowning out this information and political discourses sa Pilipinas. But on the other hand, meron ding may technical difficulties. Meron ding possible sites of resistance. Slide 6. Yeah. So, there were some simple memes that were degrading our president himself. So ito, mga different types of oven temperatures. Meron mga 40, may 50, may 100, may 0. Next. There are also memes that were actively making fun of the ongoing discourses. So for example, this is one talking about how Marcos received his wealth through Bitcoin in 1965. And slide. Okay lang po. Anyways, next. So, ayun nga. Ayan. There are also memes which, dahil naka-censor siya, pero it says that BBM pa rin kami in a face that is looking very derogatory. Next. Sensya na po to the Zoom audience. We are currently having technical difficulties. Please stand by as we wait for the technical difficulties to be resolved. We will have a short 1-minute interlude. Okay na po. Okay, to the Zoom audience, we have resolved the technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience. Akin po. So, should I continue the talk? Tuloy lang ba? Okay na po. All right. So, thank you once again. So, just a brief recap in case hindi siya na-share. So, this is an example of a meme of our beloved president. Citing, kunyari, meron mga 30 degrees, may 180 degrees, meron ring 0 degree. Next. So, there are also memes that also talk about discourse and are only possible because you have an intimate awareness of what was happening during the Philippine elections. So, this is in reference to the Tony Gonzaga interview na very one-sided. Tinanong, bakit mayaman ang Marcos family? Kasi in 1965, nag-Bitcoin tatay ko. Next. So there are also memes, na takban lang siya, pero there are also memes that mock and infantilize those that are pro-Marcos supporters. Sabi lang, BBM pa rin, BBM pa rin, in a very mocking face. Next. Ano magpakita to? Ay, hindi nagpakita. Anyways. There is another meme that used the meme format itself, pero it's not necessarily a meme, to bring up several social issues as it relates to the Marcos family. So, let me just read it quickly. Isipin nyo, puro memes at okray lang ang kaya nilang ibato sa kay Lenny. Kesyo dilawan tae, 4 times 4, all girls, lugaw, puro puna, etc. Pero hindi nila matawag na magnanakaw at kurakot si Lenny. So using the meme format, they were able to not only talk about the existing disinformation literature and disinformation narratives used by the Marcos side, tinapatan pa nila at saka dinagdagan. Next. Okay, so here are just some examples of ginagamit yung narrative in these spaces by pro-Marcos supporters, pero nire-respondan siya ng people that are pro-Lenny. And lastly, meron pa isa. Yan. Na, ayun nga, people can also use art and visual medium in order to call out the issues, make them visible, and discuss them in an open forum. So, ito na yung pinaka-last slide ko. I just want to talk about the findings that I had in brief detail. So, kaya siya dalawa is because I want to acknowledge na the dying democracy narrative does have evidence to it. It's very pervasive and it's very stressing. Ayun nga, I feel like a lot of us have come here together because we feel that disinformation networks are tightening script within the Philippines. So evidence supports that idea. However, there are also evidences to show that people are not helpless. They are not conceived as someone na niloloko lang sila or wala silang kakayahan. They can add and have been responding to the flood in this example through memes. Ayon, some people are entering the conversations with closed minds. So for example, mga trolls, making discourse seem pointless. However, people are actually listening to the discourse and are incorporating it as they try to address those particular closed-minded discourses. Ngayon, in the dying discourse democracy, parang there are pro-hegemonic and traditional actors such as the PCO, I mentioned na, that have the most influence in how the conversations go. However, I feel like people can have that too, especially if we think about communication as decentralized away from the center. That it's not just the media or the government landscape that matters. Conversations happen all the time, and those matter too. The lie repeated makes it fact, according to Maria Ressa, and I argue that it does not, and there are people that won't let it. Lastly, digital lies type of physical and political practice na the flood of disinformation has paralyzed Philippine democracy. I wanted to reverse that and say that political practice intertwines with the digital. And because we can have impacts on our digital presences, that affects political practices as well. So yun, that's me. Thank you very much for having me. Maraming salamat po.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Orville B. Tatcho. I'm an associate professor and the current chair of the Department of Communication, University of the Philippines, Baguio. So on behalf of my co-author, attorney Clifford Chan of the Institute of Management at the University of the Philippines, Baguio, allow me to share some insights about our essay. I encourage you to read the essay and send me questions or clarifications through my corresponding email. So here are the assumptions of our study. Let me start with the first one, that debates are imperfect, but they provide benefits to the candidates and voters. In making a case to mandate candidate participation in presidential debates, the essay inevitably talks about the benefits of debates as a platform. We do not argue that debates are perfect in that they assure victories for candidates. Rather, we believe that debates provide a level playing field in terms of airtime, an equal opportunity for candidates to argue, attack, and defend, and an opportunity for voters to
We had Gerard Martin C. Suarez a while ago. After this, we will be hearing from the research of Thea, Pamela, Pauline, Javier. And then after that will be the research by Nieva, Gallema, and Tatcho. I hope that the people who are online are still with us and are listening to us. We are around, we have around 20, a while ago, 30 participants online. And yeah, I hope that you are still very much engaged no, despite the technical difficulties that we're experiencing. Are we ready? Okay, so we will now have our next research.
Members of the Academe, I am Thea Pamela Pauline A. Javier from the De La Salle College of St. Benilde Antipolo campus, and I'm here to give you an overview of my paper entitled From the Words of a Strongman, a Textual Analysis of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's Talk to the People speeches during the election season vis-a-vis audiences' social media engagements. My study aimed to know how did PRRD communicate his political agenda to the incoming administration through his Talk to the People speeches at the height of the 2022 election season. For my methodology, I used textual analysis to describe the themes that emerged in PRRD's Talk to the People speeches from April 11 to May 12, 2022. For the audience engagement, I used two methods to determine the process of interpretation of the audience concerning PRRD's speeches. First, I look for a news organization that has aired all of PRRD's 5 speeches live on its Facebook page. Inquirer.net has met this criterion. The first method for this layer is to analyze the content of the first 20 most relevant comments per live speech, totaling to 100 comments for all live speeches. However, to triangulate the result of the first method for the audience engagement, I opted to do another thematic analysis, this time on comments that actually engage with the speech in focus. To determine which comments to analyze, they have to meet at least one criteria that I have set on my paper. I found in the study that PRRD communicated his political agenda by employing his usual strongman facade while also subtly currying favor to the incoming administration, as seen from the themes that have emerged. Despite his recurring tactics in his public speeches, the former president's supporters continued to sustain their number, as seen in the comments analyzed in the discourse practice level, allowing his daughter to win the VP seat, tagging along her partner, Marcos Jr. This paper used the Habermasian public sphere as its theoretical framework, backing on the idea that social media serves as a digital public sphere, specifically Facebook. I am convinced that a careful examination of political discourses is a must, even more so now, of the rampant disinformation and spread of fake news, not to mention political propaganda and some attempts of historical revisionism. If more teachers will conduct message analysis, they will be more able to teach this skill to their students. As a communication teacher, I am confident that I can teach my students more if I know how to conduct a discourse analysis of several kinds. When students are trained to look at language beyond its surface level meaning, they cannot be easily deceived or politicized. Lastly, I also considered that knowledge can be found in the real world setting, which is why I was aiming to study a phenomenon that is only not confined to the academia, but in a large scale arena as well. So, in short, communication students, discourse analysts, and political advisors can make use of the results of this study. That is all, and I hope to hear your thoughts about my paper. Again, thank you and good afternoon.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Philippines Communication Society, for this opportunity to briefly present our article about the different frames of Sara Duterte Carpio's candidacy last 2022 election. With the leadership of Ms. Venice Nieva and with the help of our thesis advisor at the University of the Philippines Baguio, Mr. Orville Tatcho, I, Ayra Gallema, am truly honored to share with you the summative points that you can find in our article. Now, if you're interested in politics, social media, electoral strategies, and framing research, then you might as well start Googling this one. In Philippine politics, the Dutertes became one of the most prominent and we can say one of the most influential families, not just in Davao, but also on a national scale, since former President Rodrigo Duterte won the highest seat of power. And last year, Sara Duterte Carpio was expected to be his successor. Though Duterte Carpio instead ran for the vice presidency and gained an overwhelming 31.5 million votes. That's almost half of the total registered Filipino voters for the May 9, 2022 elections. Her persona is indeed intriguing and probably it's one of the reasons why she picked our interest and chose her as her subject of study for our communication research. So, what did we deduce from observing these 4 Facebook groups that were actively utilized for Vice President Sarah's candidacy and interviewing some of the group members? Well, initially, we were studying how her supporters frame her as their presidential bet. As you can see, all the Facebook group names were explicitly campaigning for her as the next Philippine president. However, despite not running for presidency, the frames lifted are still relevant to understanding how social media plays a vital role in influencing political communication in contemporary elections. We used 3 categories in Irving Goffman's framing theory, specifically make-believe, contest, and ceremonial frames. But you may ask, why framing theory? As communication students, we are interested in studying phenomena that show how people use their communication abilities to express their intent and achieve their end goal. And politics is one of the best areas where these things can be studied in a critical and interpretive way, though our qualitative research was anchored in the interpretive paradigm. Given that social media has now become a very powerful tool in electoral campaigns, framing theory is best for us to successfully analyze the ways Duterte Carpio supporters formulated their posts to build their candidate's image and how they talked to and attempted to persuade their co-voters. Basically, how they frame a certain persona through words and actions. Well, framing theory has also been widely used in the field of political communication. This is very helpful for us to see and interpret the realities being painted by individuals. The different frame categories have helped us identify key images from the various posts we monitored during our data gathering. Framing research deals with people's ability to convey, interpret, and describe what they talk or think about. In our case, these were manifested through Facebook posts and our respondents' answers to our interview questions. From our 6 interview respondents, which were composed of administrators, moderators, and active members of the previously shown Facebook support groups, and 25 encoded posts in our coding sheets, we were able to uncover these frames. Under make-believe frame are family and gender frames, cultural frames, and continuity frames. Contest frames also emerge, and under ceremonial is a frame orchestrating a supposed public clamor for Sara Duterte Carpio. All these frames discovered led us to conclude that 1. There is no singular frame for Duterte Carpio's candidacy. The advantages and disadvantages of this were discussed in the article. 2. The campaign for Sara Duterte Carpio carries over existing campaign strategies to the 2022 elections, specifically a more active involvement of voters in the campaign communication of politicians. And lastly, campaigns energized by groups of individuals may be perceived as more genuine and representative of the people's sentiments regardless of whether the campaigns are organic. This was evident in the formation of Facebook support groups. This is just a glimpse. We invite you to read more about our articles through this link. Thank you for listening.
Our last researcher, Lordivine.
Hi everyone, what's up? So yeah, hi, my name is Lordivine Pineda. I'm a senior student at the University of the Philippines, Diliman as a BA Communication Research. It's a very important event for me because it's my first time to present in a national setting. When I was 17, I presented in Taiwan, and by 23, I'll be presenting at Oxford, though virtually. So PCS, thank you so much for the opportunity, because it's my first national research conference presentation. So the title of my research, as you can see, is the phenomenological inquiry of cyber activism, the way anak bayan Philippines see of it. So I'm not gonna make it long First, I will discuss about what's the purpose of my study. Secondly, I will discuss the research methodology. Thirdly, I will discuss the research findings. And finally, I will discuss some of the inspiration that draw me into this study. So what's the purpose of this study, right? The main purpose of this study is to locate kapwa or locate and describe kapwa in the mediated communications of anak bayan youth activists amid state rag tagging during the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, to describe how anak bayan student organizations minimize limitations of communication technologies used for cyber activism through pakikipagkapwa. And finally, to characterize the landscape or features of media technology that anak bayan members consider the most important in maximizing their pakikipagkapwa through cyber activism amid state red tagging during the COVID-19 pandemic. Just a brief context, cyber activism is a highly debated topic, but generally, as we understand it in the current context, cyber activism is the ability of students or anyone to protest online. This is debated because there are a lot of topics like slacktivism or the inability to protest online because of various virtual limitations. But apparently, in the context of anak bayan, they describe cyber activism as the ability to protest in virtual or mediated spaces, right? So I took into consideration that there are different types of cyber activism amidst COVID-19 pandemic or pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. So I took into consideration that I should only take care of the COVID-19 setup because it is where the heightened red tagging occurred, especially during the Duterte administration at the latter part. So I interviewed using the methodology of Heidegger. So Heidegger is a postmodern theologist or postmodern researcher that uses phenomenological inquiry. The difference between Heidegger and Edmund Husserl is pretty simple. Heidegger believed in the dialogic approach of research methodology in that the researcher should not be away from the topic. The researcher should be able to discuss the topic along with the subjects or along with the respondents of the research. So in my case, when I was doing the analysis, I was able to take into consideration that when I do the analysis part, I should have a dialogic approach with my respondents, which are the anak bayan youth activists. And it was not hard to do that, apparently because I'm also one of those youth sector and I represent those types of activism, except that they are more prone into or they're more involved into the political arena or in the organization of anak bayan. So what are the results of the discussion, right? The results are pretty impressive, I think, primarily because one, in the context, the generation that we have today, it is hard to see pakikipagkapwa or the ability of people to have a heightened empathy, primarily of the bubble filters and algorithm that we have today. So what did they tell me? So first of all, pakikipagkapwa is really relevant to them because it is how they enable the neutral and the opposition. Or when you talk about neutral, these are the people who believe, who are a bit politically apathetic, although they have the idea of why politics is important in their daily lifestyle. And they also talk about how pakikipagkapwa is important to those who are opposed to the anak bayan politics online. So let's first discuss what they think of the outgroup members or the opposition of anak bayan. Right. Pakikipagkapwa, the Filipino psychology, happens if you see a BBM supporter online. You do not antagonize them because it is supposedly a political orientation in a continuous process. Despite that you have a different opinion, you understand the material conditions that led them to formulate their own opinions. So that is from one of the, Christian Mendoza, one of the leaders of Anak Bayan Philippines or Anak Bayan Youth Philippines. Secondly, on the outgroup or the neutral, these are moderate people. Sometimes they tend to be very politically apathetic, but they said that or anak bayan members said that we need pakikipagkapwa to invite non-activists to understand and join the government. We need longer patience and we need to interact even with Marcos apologies, but there are times when we need to be militant but it doesn't mean that we need to be rude. We cannot invite people if you do not patiently and calmly interact with them, right? And for those members or in-group activists, it is vital. Anak bayan apparently have a problem internally because during the COVID-19 pandemic, there are a lot of debates or antagonisms on the idea of cyber activism within Anak Bayan themselves. So when it comes to like the activists within the organization, they said that part of the landscape of activism is that members are all healthy, not only to be an able body or to be an employee of the movement, There is a disparity in age. Older members are dismissive of, for example, mental health concerns. It is very ugly if you do not know the biological disposition of a person or the activists, right? You fail to acknowledge that you are part of the problem. It is an individual mistake of the people, and it is sad that it is painted in the image of Anak Bayan movement. It is a reflection of the rotten culture of the organization. It is also a protest that I say and continue with the Anak Bayan struggle. So this is in the context of the older generation versus younger generation and their idea of cyber activism. For older generation, believe that cyber activism is just a lazy way to protest against the political or protest against bad political actors, right? But younger generation, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is also a protest to them. And it's also a way for them to pakikipagkapwa, to fight against the rotten culture of the Anak Bayan organization. So my research is not only about like pakikipagkapwa, it's like a combination of apparatus theory too that has been used before by various new researchers. I would say that it is a very new way of combining theories, but apparently it worked. So on the design of the technology, it is very important for activists, for example, or part of the results of my study is that the design of the technology is very important in the landscape of political activism. They said that in order for them to apply pakikipagkapwa more thoroughly, although it is difficult to see it online, to the effects of, for example, hate speech and social media bubble filters, they managed to adapt by consistently messaging each other in encrypted messaging applications. They consider staying in Anak Bayan an individual protest in and of itself. To appropriate activism in the digital age is the progress they're trying to pursue. And they regard pakikipagkapwa as the vital interaction with various or vital interaction with various actors that tag them as communists. So as you can see, the key findings are first, on the opposition, it is very important to have kapwa or pakikipagkapwa on the neutral people online, those that do not hate them but are apparently not with them. Our pakikipagkapwa is also vital, and even within the context or internal protestations in Anak Bayan, it is also very important. So yun, the main reason, I graduated STEM, so it's my first time in the liberal arts, and the main reason I conducted a kapwa study is because my grandmother's main relevant or it's my grandmother's one biggest lesson in my lifetime. It is hard as a youth to see pakikipagkapwa because it is a very old topic, but it is something that I think I would have done more thoroughly and I would apply more thoroughly in the current times because it is one of the things that is needed in the bubble filtered society. So as Virgilio Amayo said, pakikipagkapwa is a heightened sense of empathy. And as Filipinos, it's one of their greatest gifts in the society that we have today. So I hope that more research will be done about this in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lordivine. And thank you to all the authors who are here and online with us. Before we move on to the next part of our or next half of our program, we will have a very short break. No? For our guests here on site, we have refreshments for coffee break. And then for those who are online, you may have your biological break and coffee over there at your own homes. All right. So we will be back in around 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you. And please stay with us for those who are online. Okay, so we now continue with the next part of our program. But before that, we would like to thank also Dr. Jonathan Ong for writing the foreword of the PCS Review 2022. Okay, let's give him a round of applause. So today we are also lucky to have with us virtually as keynote speaker a well-known political columnist. Among his notable distinctions are the Presidential Medal of Merit of the Republic of the Philippines in 2016, the 2015 Freedom Flame from the Friedrich Neumann Foundation for Freedom, the Opinion Writer of the Year for 1994 and 2005 by the Rotary Club of Manila Journalism's Award, and the first prize for the English essay category of the Don Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards for Literature in 1997. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a virtual round of applause to Mr. Manolo Quezon.
I'd like to thank you for your invitation. This is an important event, and I appreciate very much being asked by Dr. Pernia in particular to address you today on something that we're all involved in, all interested in, but I'm not sure anymore if we quite know what's going on. And I'd like to talk to you about that today. The question of political communication is something that is dear to all of us. Stanford tells us that it happens in every country. It includes the exchange of ideas among members of the public, to which we all belong to, and the sending of messages from the public to people serving in government and vice versa. And important words here, conversation and negotiation among people within the government of a nation or even between nations. Now, it is a period of flux and a period of great challenges. Studies in Universidad de Navarra tells us that there are new phenomena taking place, some that are happening at lightning speed, affecting the loss of credibility of political actors, and that includes the communicators themselves, the means that they communicate. And it includes the trivialization of politics and the inclusion of technology to an unprecedented extent, and how this intervenes, in the words of that study of the Universidad de Navarra, and how it has led to new forms of communication and new forms of behavior inspired or provoked by that behavior is something that is of concern to all of us. Essentially, I would like to talk to you about a big word with a simple meaning, and that is a conundrum, that is a confusing and difficult problem or a question. And the conundrum confronting us today, I propose, is one boiled down to this simple sentence: where everyone is an expert, what is left for the experts to do? Where everyone has the means, the ability, and even the motive to become a communicator for good or ill, what is left for people who have spent their lives perfecting, analyzing, studying, categorizing all of this today? This editorial cartoon is one that I love sharing with people because I think it inculcates or encapsulates the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. It's one in which expertise by and of its very nature is suspect, and if not merely suspect, then something to be fought against because it is objectionable. What then is the space for experts like yourselves, experts who want to study and put these studies together in a publication? What an old-fashioned notion that is. Well, I think it goes back to Rizal, and the answer is old, and it is as old as Rizal, and he himself pointed to a reason as old as the ancient Greeks. And it is one that he put in his introduction or his dedication to the Noli, and it is to expose. And therefore, by this exposition, to propose by means of a dissection and a debate what exactly is going on and what should be done about it. And if we take this sort of Rizalian challenge at the heart of our activities not only here today, but moving forward, then I think we have something good going for all of us. Now, what we have seen in the year of the elections of 2022, incidentally, the year encompassed by the studies that are being published today, was one of the most historic and perhaps unprecedented elections in our political history. One that was characterized by its being hyperlocal, also increasingly regional, but also strategically global. This wonderful illustration that you see here, an infographic that you would easily find online, puts all of these things together in ways that are new, meaningful, and yet necessary. Now, 2022, to my mind, was significant for two particular reasons. It was the first majority presidency in the Fifth Republic, our current republic, which has existed since 1987. In fact, the first majority presidency, depending on how you count, since 1965 or 1986. Definitely the third highest first-term victory in our electoral history. How did this come about is something that the political scientists and the strategists, the journalists, and the historians will be poring over. But it was also a landmark year in political communications. And that is something that I'd like to explore just briefly today. Now, I always go back to a term by one of the biographers of Rizal and a man who was steeped in Rizal, Leon Maria Guerrero, who once upon a time said, "Today began yesterday." That was true then as it is today. Now, for political communications, there have been milestones. It is an evolving science. It is an evolving field of inquiry. It is one with its milestones, whether the rise of newspapers and radio as modern-day propaganda movements dating back to the era of the independence movements, or even the proposal in the Third Republic under President Quirino to introduce lobbying as a profession, which could be regulated by the states, introducing the art and dismal science, some would say, of PR. There would be also continuing evolution and changes in the way power and the Fourth Estate deal with each other. In 1953, according to people at the time, the era of embedded journalism really began, with a very close and some say unhealthy relationship evolving between the presidency and the mass media. In 1973, of course, we saw both the acme and the apogee of state control as it would evolve under martial law. First, with the total defeat of the old pre-martial law press, the creation of a monolithic state-controlled media, and the rise of the mosquito press. And of course, in 2016, we saw the victory of social media as a factor that could radically change and affect the outcome of elections. My argument for some time has been that in 2022, we saw the rise of a new society, a new society because it's different from the old new society, and it being a new post-media society with all that that implies. Now, all of this has come to pass because of many things. There have been studies about how even the nature of our demographics has affected politics, how even changes in the way the political candidates decide to be candidates and negotiate their candidacies, negotiate it with their rivals and with an increasingly mercenary electorate, and an electorate, by the way, that is increasingly tuning out from the mass media that could in the past make and break candidacies, is something that bears study. And this suggests to me at this point that what is required now more than ever is a multidisciplinary approach to the study of communications. It is one that involves, of course, the messaging and the people responding to the messaging. One revealing factoid, you could say, from the recent elections comes from perhaps the most marginal part of it, which is in the party list, which is how alienation became the catalyst to political mobilization. The two top party lists were interesting in themselves. The ACT-CIS party list, which in itself was the expansion of the franchise of an endorsing journalist, the Tulfos, to be specific, became the biggest winner among the party lists with its slogan of the party list ng mga inaapi, with all that suggests. And the second highest votes in the party list going to a party list organized by a former policeman, which mobilized the alienation of a big sector of our population, those who are riding motorcycles and are regularly picked on and abused by the police. Motorcycle riders, one rider became the second highest voted party list in our history. Now, with all of these changes comes the reality we have seen, in which I have argued time and again that the era of our being a newly restored democracy that began in 1986 and in many ways came to an end in 2016 definitively gave way to a new era, the contours of which we are still defining, but which is basically a combination of the old and the new. And it is the interplay and the collision between this old and new that will define our future. Now, an example of how things have become so complicated is that you would have to involve an experiment of this sort. Let me just walk you through it briefly. If you go to my YouTube page, you'll find two playlists. One looking at the campaign music of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and the other one looking at the campaign music of Leni Robredo. This was just a sort of experiment in, I think, one of the most interesting forms of political communication, which is, of course, music. Now, what was interesting about this was that while that of Leni Robredo led to a lot of different groups contributing their different contemporary styles, the one of Ferdinand Marcos was in itself a masterclass in creative adaptation. It started with an anthem. You will find, for example, a clip from a government propaganda video in 1974 with a song that became the anthem of the new society. And it came to finding out through YouTube that this anthem slowly began to be reintroduced to a new post-EDSA, in a sense, Marcos generation. One of the earliest being this clip from 2018, which featured an evolving strategy of introducing the song to school bands throughout the country. And the bands would just play it over and over again and reintroduce it to, in a sense, the hearing landscape of a new generation of Filipinos, so that by 2022, what was old and seemingly forgotten had been reintroduced and could serve as a trigger to be sparked to gain interest, leading to the use and revival of the Marcos era New Society anthem as the core anthem of the Marcos 2022 presidential campaign. That in and of itself could create, I believe, dozens of studies about how this was accomplished and the kind of thinking and realizations that went into it. But it suggests to us that we have to look about what's new about the old in terms of the main focus for political communications in this and most countries, which is the media and the public and officialdom's interplay with that institution and the things it tells us. It starts with looking at trends over time, how television has become dominant, how the internet has increased exponentially in terms of its reach and scope, how radio is in decline, how print, in a sense, has evaporated, and how even movies may now be entering a new phase of how they're consumed and used. This is something that even as we try to make sense of the political interplay of the news cycle, the formation of stories, the creation of opinion, the increased use of he said, she said instead of hard reportage, because of this never-ending quest for milliseconds of public attention, is something that might lead us to be oblivious to the deeper changes that are occurring right in front of us. We know that the public has been unleashed. It is no longer a passive, regularly scheduled consumer of the output of media and everyone trying to affect it, to an active participant in the formation and deformation of media. We know that the changes have led to the decline of notions such as the truth, of seriousness, of public service, and the rise in instant gratification, in sensationalism, and in setting one part of society against the other, all for that precious milliseconds of clicking and choosing. Now, for us, what has been significant in the first election that took place after the pandemic, and therefore the first election that is comparable in scope and in the newness of what happened to perhaps our 1946 post-World War II election, was the decline of television, both because of the removal of major actors in the media landscape itself, and also because of the change in behavior that had been triggered, fostered, and resulted from the pandemic itself. The era of TV being king may no longer be a tenable argument to uphold. It is one, however, that is in constant flux, as Nielsen tells us. Maybe more people will be watching things, although they will be watching it with less attention because they're being at home less anymore. Maybe TV will stabilize, but it is only with one sort of major network left that is gun shy and afraid to offend or inquire too deeply into what is going on. It is one where even the era of the radio announcer may be going away, even though there is a second wind for radio in terms of the shift to FM, even as there's a decline in AM. It is one where digital is the new domain, where both the way we communicate with each other and therefore the way of figuring out what people are saying to each other is now being done by video calls and less versus messaging, which is, when you think of it, the removal of what has managed to endure throughout all of these technological changes, which is the primacy of the written word. And that written word being measurable and quantifiable even with modern technologies. How will this be done when everything is instantly evaporated because it's just on video calls? It's the supremacy now of TikTok, but that it may itself be fading by the time of the next election. The supremacy of things like Netflix, which has no news, which may have some documentaries, but which is a manifestation of an increasingly fragmented landscape of consumers. How is this affecting all of us? And this brings us to trying to understand that everything that is new is rapidly getting old, with all that involves. There may be many new internet users, and they're being added to all the time. But it is one where they are being funneled to perhaps several dominant technologies, but each one of which can rise and fall with amazing swiftness. In 2021, they would have told us that Facebook is still top for news. But YouTube, even then, was a close second. Messenger was third, and TikTok was way below. But is this still even the case just 2 years later as we're looking at 2023? It's one where we are communicating and sharing through our social medias, but as an earlier slide was showing you, increasingly less in terms of links and pictures and words and more in terms of the spoken word. It is one where we are perhaps doing it more with family and friends and less with the people we are not so close to, but yet where we can increasingly find a comfort level with people we might otherwise never have found, including having expressing and having views that previously would not have been mainstream. The reality is, of course, that we are simply split in our attentions, where we are having to be exposed to more, but being able to absorb less because we're juggling too many things at the same time. It is one that is crowding out media, which in and of itself is an opportunity and a threat, not just to media, from which many of us are joined to at the hip, so to speak, but it is also one that is presenting a challenge for political communicators themselves, just as they perfect and manage to dominate one strategy. A new one is always possibly showing up. So, media and communicators, to which many people believe is the fundamental identity of media, is itself, of course, facing a question of trust. It is one that extends, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, to all experts, as the number of those who can claim expertise expands, including the means to present themselves as the experts. So I would like to close with 3 challenges, I think, that confront us. 3 challenges that I think are at the heart of the articles that you will find in this and hopefully future editions of the studies we will be consuming and I hope sharing. What has endured? Who are the actors? What are the technologies? What are the methods that have endured? What is ascendant? Some may be enduring and some may still be existing, but others are more dominant today than they were yesterday. What are these? How did it come about? How did it change the landscape? And what are the rising challenges to those? And ultimately, who are the audiences? Many of the assumptions that politicians, media people, and even we, the people, as the people, many of these assumptions that we used to have no longer hold today. Are we even part of a national audience? Is there even such a thing? When we are spoken to, are we being spoken to in the aggregate, which is in many ways the old assumption and the bedrock of the whole idea of political communications? Or are we tiny subtotals? And then how is these subtotals in turn aggregated, and what are they turned into? To what end? Who really understands what is going on? And more importantly, who is really seeing the possible effects, including the unintended consequences of the evolution, devolution, and mutation that we are seeing today? These are just some thoughts, some quick questions, some ideas for you today. This is going to be a day of information overload, because here today you have that rarest of the rare, that combination of committed professionals who put knowledge ahead of all things. May you never lose hope, and may you always have someone with whom to share your ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quezon. And now we will hear from the authors of our essays and features. Again, as they present their works, you may take note of your questions and you may ask these questions at the end of the presentation or during our open forum. So the first essay is written by Orville Tatcho, who was also one of our presenters a while ago. And with Clifford Chan, they will be presenting their work virtually. So Clifford Chan is a lecturer at the Institute of Management in the University of the Philippines, Baguio. The second essay is by Holden Kenneth G. Alcazaren, an assistant professor from the Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts of UP Diliman, and he will be with us today. The first feature is authored by John Benedik Bunquin and Fatima and will be presenting their work virtually. John Benedik Bunquin is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines Department of Communication Research and is currently taking his PhD in Communication and Media Studies at the University of Oregon as a Fulbright scholar, while Fatima Gao is a PhD student in Media Technology and Society program at the Northwestern University, Illinois, and a former assistant professor at the UP Diliman. And our second feature is an interview conducted by Christine Joy Magpayo, an assistant professor at the Department of Speech, Communication, and Theater Arts in UP Diliman. She is also with us today to present her feature. Ladies and gentlemen, our essays and features.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Orville B. Tatcho. I'm an associate professor and the current chair of the Department of Communication, University of the Philippines, Baguio. So on behalf of my co-author, attorney Clifford Chan of the Institute of Management at the University of the Philippines, Baguio, allow me to share some insights about our essay. I encourage you to read the essay and send me questions or clarifications through my corresponding email. So here are the assumptions of our study. Let me start with the first one, that debates are imperfect, but they provide benefits to the candidates and voters. In making a case to mandate candidate participation in presidential debates, the essay inevitably talks about the benefits of debates as a platform. We do not argue that debates are perfect in that they assure victories for candidates. Rather, we believe that debates provide a level playing field in terms of airtime, an equal opportunity for candidates to argue, attack, and defend, and an opportunity for voters to compare candidates side by side. These opportunities will only be maximized if all candidates attend debates, including the front-runners in pre-election polls. Unfortunately, in the 2022 elections, the polls seem to have signaled that a candidate need not attend debates if survey results are favorable to their side. We would like to go against this mentality that seems to just view elections as a numbers game. We suggest that even if participating in debates may not be consequential to electoral outcomes, the opportunity that debates provide for the voters to compare their candidates in one platform is a value in and of itself, especially if it leads to a democracy with a more deliberative quality. Doubtless, debates may also be platforms for partisanship, a spectator sport, if you will, rather than a venue for deliberation. However, we believe that when all candidates join debates, it is a symbolic gesture where they signify that they are willing to subject themselves to the rigors of democracy, to confront criticisms from all sides, to account for what they say and where they stand on issues, and to respect the agency of voters to make informed decisions. Second, we are not satisfied with status quo, where candidates can refuse to participate in debates. Mandating candidate participation in debates may seem undemocratic. but we posit that the candidate's right to refuse or not participate is secondary to the right of the voter to an informed choice. The premise here is that the voter will make an informed choice if they see all candidates in one platform. We conceded that such may not always be the case. Debates will not change the minds of partisan voters. However, debates are beneficial because they can expose the competence or incompetence of candidates through processes of attacking, defending, argumentation, and refutation. Debates may also raise the bar for how candidates should be assessed, not just on the metric of charisma, personality, or image building, but communicative rationality, consistency of policy stances, clarity of mind, and decisiveness and firmness. Finally, we wish to institutionalize debates or establish a rich and healthy political tradition of debates in the Philippines, especially at the presidential level. Are we then putting too much faith on debates? We respond with yes, if that means reimagining the laws that govern candidate participation. As our study is a preliminary inquiry, we recognize that institutionalizing presidential debates may entail a lot of things, like amending the Constitution, drafting a law requiring attendance to presidential debates, creating more incentives to encourage participation, and imposing penalties like disqualification and other criminal and administrative penalties for candidates who decline to participate. We believe it is worth giving institutionalizing debates a shot, starting at the presidential level and then later expanding to lower levels of government. We think that we can end the rhetoric of silence and inarticulacy of candidates who do not participate in debates if we establish a political tradition of debates in the Philippines. In the end, candidates may still rely on their own chosen platforms, which are partial or sympathetic to their side, like social media. But if debates become a common arena where candidates, for once, share a stage and come out of their silos and echo chambers, then that will be for the benefit of our democracy. Thank you so much for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is about my essay entitled Classrooms as Socio-Politically Conscious Learning Spaces, Developing Political Literacy, Affect, and Discourse. This is a paper I've written in response to the many educational issues that have emerged during the last presidential election. Next slide. Now, the last presidential election has proven the increasing political awareness of many Filipinos that has created complex and somewhat polarizing issues in the use of social media as a space for political discourse, with many Filipinos, which include teachers from private and public institutions, expressing their political views and dissents in this space. The Department of Education has reminded teachers of their responsibility for political neutrality in a now deleted Facebook post from the then DepEd Secretary Leonor Briones. She even cited DepEd Order number 48, Series of 2018, the prohibition on electioneering and partisan political activity. However, this is met with critiques explaining how this can be problematic as teachers. As teachers are supposed to foster critical thinking and distinguish wrong from right. As ACT Representative Franz Castro stated, saying that teachers should remain apolitical is like saying they should be robots, in turn mold robots that do not care about what is happening in our society. Next slide. With all these debates with the intersectionality of politics in the classroom, this essay argues that battling current social problems like fake news and misinformation requires the integration of political discourse. Now, in achieving these outcomes, classrooms should become learning spaces that encourage socio-politically conscious minds through fostering political literacy, political affect, and political discourse. Next. In upholding values of equality and democracy, political participation positively influences one's personal development, particularly citizenship of our students. So how do we develop political participation of our students? One of the significant scopes of citizenship is the discussions on political literacy, where our students learn about how to be effective in public life through knowledge, skills, and values. In one study, findings revealed how teaching students to be critical of political problems enables them to effectively make their own decisions and responsibly perform their duties as citizens, thus arguing for political knowledge in developing political participation. It is also important to understand the significance of emotion in politics. In this context, a domain of emotional attachments in political life is one's emotional investments in socio-political issues that continually preserves democracy and fuels social movements. In various classroom-based research, findings showed how students' motivated reasoning dismiss any presented factual evidence contradicting their worldviews that usually lead to dispute between students and faculty and silencing behaviors inside the classroom. Now, these situations only confirm how people's developed worldviews inhibits acceptance to any information that requires critical change of their worldview, thereby proving the presence of one's affect as an influential construct in interpreting and responding to political discussions. With people holding different political views, another aspect should be emphasized as political discourse. Political discourse upholds the value of academic freedom whilst promoting culture of diversity and inclusivity. Students should be able to contribute in developing activism as part of the school culture through asserting their worldviews and experiences that were distinctly theirs, while educators reinforce this culture through inculcating activism through policies, programs, and resources. Next. To strengthen my arguments, I try to ground them with various theories to expound how learning is and should be situated in the learner's social and political context. First, Vygotsky's sociocultural theory posits that one's learning is significantly enhanced and shaped through social interaction. This position attributes how teacher-student interactions are vital in defining how students were able to enact or misalign a socially conscious perspective on society. Second, Damasio's conscious theory explains how the constructs of emotions, feelings, and feeling a feeling, while interacting with the environment, create possibilities to generate representations of oneself where consciousness transpires. With brain researchers identifying neuronal networks involved in political choices, studies showed how social emotions such as empathy, admiration, and jealousy are essential to these forms of social decision-making. These findings should be able to prompt conversations on how important it is for students to regulate their own emotions that still allow critical thinking towards social issues that they may or may not already have preconceived notions. And last, the social construction of reality theory emphasizes how the social environment influences cognitive processes and social conventions which determine behaviors. Understanding that one's cognition and emotions are socially influenced, fostering an environment that allows discussions on social and political issues provides students a space in making their own decisions while interpreting these issues together with their peers and teachers, thus creating a more self-directed and autonomous learner. Next, with the proliferation of fake news in social media, it is more important for classrooms to welcome political discourses and politically driven topics for students to practice their autonomy and critical thinking. Teachers should be able to transform their classrooms to socio-politically aware learning spaces that cater to the hunger and ignorance of the youth about the realities of the world. Now, in this transformational process, teachers should be able to feed knowledge and information through developing one's political literacy, to touch emotions and consciousness of one's political life, and to nurture a learning space open for political discourses, no matter how difficult and contradicting they may be. And I thank you.
I'm Fatima, and together with my project co-lead, Bunquin, we'll walk you through an overview of our research project called Digital Public Pulse, featured in the latest issue of PCS Review. Our research is born out of the changing landscape of Philippine politics as mediated by digital media. On one hand, it is an emerging space for traditionally marginalized actors to participate in political discourse through agenda setting, dissent and resistance, and activism. On the other, these same affordances are used for political manipulation through disinformation and influence operation by the state and other politically vested actors. This reality begets a new research approach that we can engage in all layers of this mediation. Digital Public Pulse is designed to respond to this new research. The Philippine Media Monitoring Laboratory at UP Diliman Department of Communication Research. DPP is a pioneering interdisciplinary media monitoring collaboration that inquires about the intersection of digital publics, social networks, and media convergence. For our pilot project, we studied the digital public sphere engaged in the 2022 Philippine elections by mapping the social networks that constitute it, identifying its salient topics and issues, and analyzing discourses that characterize its emergent political culture. In addition, we also deep dive into cases of network political manipulation we found in our larger datasets and shared it to the public ahead of the report through the Facts First initiatives. DPP has a distinct interdisciplinary orientation, primarily situated in communication and media studies while engaging concepts in political science and methods in data science. It is also unprecedented in its large-scale multi-method and multi-platform approach. We used network analysis, textual analysis, and machine learning methods in our study, covered a full election year in our data, and performed analysis across the major social media platforms in the Philippines: Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Working within the limits and constraints of digital data, the research design of DPP is always going to be partial, but comparatively exhaustive from other kinds of election or social media research. We also emphasize the mediated nature of political process in the study, studying the intersection of politics and media technologies. And more than an academic endeavor, we also intend DPP to generate actionable insights and recommendations to relevant stakeholders, including but not limited to the government, media, professional and civil society, social media companies, and the public.
Digital research is not easy, and in our essay, we summarize the challenges we encountered in studying the elections from a computational approach. First, we had to have the tools and resources in doing big data research. Fatima and I have engaged in similar studies before, and we are aware of some free and affordable tools that we can use for this project. But knowing the right tools is one thing, maximizing them is another. So we did workshops with members of the Philippine Media Monitoring Laboratory. And for skill gaps and resources we didn't have, we engaged in collaborations with academics and the industry members who share the same vision and interest in studying the elections. Second, we had to recognize that digital trace data isn't some magical pipeline that can give us unlimited research material. It's messy, it's based on algorithms, on people's performative acts online, and it's also highly probable that a chunk of it came from bots and trolls. In fact, 90% of the time we're just spent cleaning data. It's also never generalizable, even if we're able to collect 10 million cases online. And these have implications on how we derived insights and talked about our findings in our research. Third, we had to recognize that digital data is always drifting or changing because the population might have started behaving differently due to real-world events. It's also possible that the system itself, where we're collecting data, has shifted. In our research, changes in social media policies and page takedowns by Facebook and Twitter have shifted results from a per-quarter perspective. We had to be agile and flexible in accounting for their effects in our analysis. Last is that we always have to be conscious of the consequences of our research. Unanticipated secondary use might happen, wherein someone takes the data and with the amount of information it contains, uses it for other ways like surveillance and targeting. We had to make sure our data is anonymized, and when reporting, we reported in aggregates. We also had to consider the consequences of putting ourselves out there in communicating our research. Fatima and I both experienced receiving attacks online from those who disagreed with the findings. We had to go private and locked our accounts. I even deactivated mine for some time. We emphasized the importance of seeking support and utilizing protections offered by academic institutions to protect researchers, especially when they put themselves out in the open to communicate their research. Ultimately, doing this research provided the whole PMM laboratory an opportunity to harness new ways of thinking and doing research beyond traditional quantitative and qualitative approaches. We're also able to forge linkages, do collaborative work through DPP, and finally, it provided us an opportunity to elevate our current practices and ask questions like, how can we involve our students and link with other researchers? How can we disseminate this effectively and reach our stakeholders? What are our ethical anchors here? And how do we protect ourselves as researchers? And how can we contribute to helping our electorate make an informed decision about the elections? Thank you so much again for providing us a venue to share the DPP experience through the PCS review.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be sharing my work about my interview with Dr. Clarissa David. Derived from the Middle French recherche, the word research prompts us to go about seeking, to look closer and again, to find something. But where and what for? The article I wrote featuring Dr. Clarissa David proceeds in 3 parts. It starts with the events, early interests, and influences that led to her becoming a political communication scholar, which poke and prod on the past. Then it zooms in to the present by framing her work on political communication and policy research as activism. And finally, it presents her advice for young scholars, which is an attempt to shape an ideal future through acknowledging the past. It comes in full circle, as it should. It's the only way we get the most of the bits and fragments of answers, to look back and inward before moving forward. So why is it necessary that we look back? Simple. Because our backgrounds, our experiences, our memories inform our personal politics. What did we know and want as a child? How much of that knowing and wanting are anchored in facts, are grounded in a reality we eventually realize we share with others whose knowledges and desires do not always coincide with ours? How do we arrive at a fair compromise? By linking our past to our present, we find and realize that dreams are meant to be shared with others. That to be a good researcher, writer, teacher, or whatnot, in the here and now, we must continually ask ourselves, what good do we contribute to a world that needs changing? And by answering to this, we hopefully find selflessness in our raison d'etre, or our reason for being. Activism need not be confined in a single form. The act of discovering the truth through research is activism. The act of telling the truth and writing them to make sure others will listen is activism. And to a certain extent, I would like to believe that doing these things at a time when truth tellers are silenced is a kind of heroism. This makes research a job that doubles as a revolutionary act of love, as it demands a tremendous amount of courage and persistence to set things right. So I say, let the numbers, let these words and letters tell important stories. Let them move us to mold better beginnings, middles, and endings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you to all our authors who are here with us at the venue and virtually. Okay, so now the floor is open for the open forum. All of those who are online, you may ask questions, or the people here in person may also ask questions to the authors and our issue editor as well. So let me begin by asking the question to Holden. Okay. All right. So Holden, how do we engage our students to be more interested in political communication? Because we see your essay is about classroom communication.
Thank you for that question. Well, actually, in engaging our students as teachers, I think we should always, it's high time, and we always starts with shifting our perspective in looking into how we're going to integrate and use politically driven topics or social issues that might be taboo inside of our classroom, and try to use it in our own classrooms as a springboard or a topic that we can devise as somewhat a topic for conversations among our own students. And I think in introducing these types of issues and types of topics, we get to learn about the opinions, the views, the insights of our students, so that we can create a safe space for them to have this discourse with an adult, to have this discourse with their own peers, so that there can be a sort of learning among, or a collaborative learning among teachers to students and peers to peers. So I think that's like an initial strategy for us for us teachers, in introducing political communication inside of our classroom. Thank you.
Ang dami ko mic. Thank you very much, Holden. Now, do we have questions from our audience? Oh, yes. Sige.
May follow-up ako kay Hold. Ay, kailangan ba dyan rin? Sige. So, kakusapin kita here. Ang follow-up ko lang, how do you think, anong comments mo about the greater society around the schools? Kunyari, yung barangay, your parents. Kasi logistically, people will always claim, wala kaming oras, wala kaming pera, wala kaming learning or resources in order to implement these nice and ideal goals. So, ano yung comment mo in that?
I think, of course, in education, it's really important and significant for us to involve the community and, of course, parents in the learning process of our students. In my personal opinion, it's really important for the institution and teachers to also engage to the community and to the parents of their students about this types of topic that might be taboo inside of their homes, so that we can introduce them that it's okay to talk about social issues, to talk about this somewhat controversial issues with their children. We can provide probably like different training workshops with parents and the community on how to try to process these types of information that our students get from social media, so that when they go outside of the classroom, when they go in their homes, when they have conversations at home with their peers, they can already think for themselves without really parroting whatever information that they get from social media. Although at times, syempre, many institutions, especially the public schools and institutions might have constricting policies, or they might have academic leaders that may seem conservative in allowing talks and discussions about these types of issues and topics. But as teachers, we can start by simply talking with the parents of our advisory class. Or as teachers, we can start by allowing our students talk about their opinions about the social issue, and then we hope to God that they can start their own conversation with their parents, with their peers at home and outside of the classroom.
And thank you, Holden. Okay, so do we have other questions from the floor or from the Zoom? I think we have our last question for our issue editor, Dr. Chen Pascual. Based on the submission this year, what do you think is the current climate of political communication in the country? And what else do you think should communication scholars explore in terms of this topic?
Okay, I actually realized that most of us only ask questions about politics in the context of comm studies during election season. Parang seasonal din yung pagtatanong about politics, when in fact, our everyday lives, nandoon ang politics in our very small spaces. Hindi pa natin pinag-uusapan dyan yung mga meso and more macro spaces, no? Pero nakakalimutan natin na magtanong at gamitin ang research sa pagtatanong nitong mga everyday questions natin about politics. And in personally actually, no, isa sa mga gusto kong malaman, napaka-basic lang. Ano nga ba para sa mga tao ngayon ang balita? At bakit hindi na nagko-consume ng balita ang mga tao? Balita as we used to know balita. I ask relatives, I ask friends across generations, nanonood pa ba kayo ng balita pag prime time? Nagbabasa pa ba kayo ng dyaryo? And most of them answered no. May iba pang dagdag na sagot na after the elections, hindi na. So itong very basic na tanong na to, kasi nakadikit din yung awareness mo about politics and your desire to know more kapag alam mo, aware ka sa mga nangyayari sa paligid mo. And the very basic source, no, credible source of news. Saan nanggagaling yun? No? Kadikit na dyan, of course, yung issues ng disinformation, misinformation, yung ating information landscape. Pero as consumers, saan nga ba nanggagaling? Meron pa ba tayong habit na gano'n? So yun yung actually sinasabi ko kay Dr. Labor at kay Christian ng isang lunch date namin na parang ang sarap tanungin at pag-usapan. Kasi ramdam na ramdam mo, maski sa pamilya mo na supposedly nagko-consume, hindi pala sila nagko-consume. So now I'm actually encouraging my pamangkins na manood ng balita, makinig ng radyo. Sabi ko kahit na nga wag na kayo mag-Twitter, mag-YouTube, mag-on na lang kayo ng TV, mag-on kayo ng radyo, sabihin niyo kung sino man yung maghahatid sa inyo sa umaga, mag-AM radio. Ganun lang ka-basic, kahit na noise lang siya para sa iba, para lang may balita. So yun ang isa sa mga projects na gusto ko. And of course, pag pinag-uusapan yung online discourse, no, ang daming pwedeng pag-aralan doon kasi hindi talaga tayo nagkakaintindihan. In the foreword of Dr. Jonathan Ong, actually pinag-usapan nila yung parallel spaces. We're all discussing pero we're not reaching out across the other space. So ang ganda rin pag-usapan kasi baka may mga standards tayong ini-expect sa sarili nating space pero hindi natin ina-apply kapag nakikipag-usap tayo sa kabilang espasyo. Kung makikipag-usap man tayo sa kabilang espasyo. So ando na yung in a world na gusto natin ng inclusivity, hindi naman tayo inclusive sa ating diskurso at nakikipag-away tayo. In a world na gusto nating woke ang lahat, no? Bakit nag-aaway-away, no? Nawawala yung pagkakaintindihan. So ang daming pwedeng pag-aralan from the everyday, from the mundane, to politics as governance, no? So ang daming pwedeng pag-aralan at I'm encouraging comm and media scholars na hindi ito seasonal, hindi ito pag pag election lang, na every 3 years lang nangyayari. Sana yung interest natin masustain and we keep on asking questions because these questions and the answers to these questions matter to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. San Pascual. That's actually great. And to those who are here and online, makakapagsulat pa tayo, di ba? For the next PCS review, sana ito yung maging topics natin for our next articles or research articles. For those who are online and for us here, I'd like to remind you that at the end of the program, we will be having a photo op. So please don't leave. Okay? So now we are going to formally close our event. And we have here the PCS Review Editor-in-Chief, Dr. Jonna Lulobor.
Maraming salamat, Jazz. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the PCS board led by President Elena E. Pernia for the leadership and guidance in upholding the value of the PCS journal. Thank you for all the forms of support that you have extended to the organization and, of course, to the PCS Review. Thank you once again to our guest editor, Dr. Pascual, for embracing the vision of the issue. It was not an easy task, right? Particularly dahil oras ng ng election ng time na kino-conceptualize natin to. We fear that no one will actually submit any work, right? For the fear of being red tag, for the fear of other things, right? And to Dr. Jonathan Ong for providing the seal of approval of the value of the issue. Thank you to our researchers, those who have submitted, climbed the steep ladder of the review process, and eventually succeeded. It was not an easy task to research on politics and communication, but here you are with your articles and, of course, your arguments. Thank you to the PCS Review editorial team, Jazz, Jackie, Christian, and to our reviewers from various fields in the humanities, in the social sciences, tough love enablers, and framers of thought-provoking questions. Thank you to our readers. We are monitoring again the downloads and the reads, and we thank you for continuously again supporting the articles. We remain inspired to do good and do better because of your reads and possible citations. Moving forward, the 2023 PCS Review is an open issue. Any thinker who has an argument, something good to say about the Philippines and the Filipinos' communication and probably media experience may submit their work starting this April. We invite you to submit your work in our journal. I think we are flashing the call for papers right now. And this will be, again, this video is to be posted in our website. So please do take note of the call for papers. We invite you again to indulge with the PCS Review. We have a lot of uploaded issues already, and you may download them free of charge. Magandang hapon ulit sa ating lahat, and thank you for joining the PCS this afternoon. I invite you to join the PCS in its future events. A while ago, our president mentioned that we are cooking some major activities from March to June. We invite you to again look into or visit our website for these exciting activities. That's it from my end, and again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Labor. So this has been the PCS Review launch. We now turn to our photo op. We will first have our photo with the editors and writers of the issue. May we call on those who are here to be on stage for the photo op. And then if you are online, please turn the video on so that we can see you. And then, sige. Yan. Yung, eto ba? Eto lang. Yan. Kita ba? Okay. Wait. Yan. Yay! Ayan. Ayan pa, ipa. Okay. Okay na? All right, now we have the edit. Guys, please stay there, and then the members of PCS, please join. PCS Board of Directors, sorry. Please join us on stage. Yeah. Pagka nag-on sila ng camera, okay na? So, isa pa sa PCS board. Apa. Okay na? Okay, so everyone, please turn your camera on so that we will have a picture with everyone. And please, everyone. Sige. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this has been the launch of PCS Review 2022, and we hope to see you in our upcoming events.